From Microbe TV, this is Beyond the Noise, episode number 53, recorded on February 10th, 2025. I'm Vincent Racaniello, and joining me today is your host, Dr. Paul Offit.
Hi, Vincent.
Paul's happy because Philadelphia won the Super Bowl.
Go Birds.
Today we're going to take a closer look at Paul's recent Substack column called The RFK Jr. Playbook. It's like you got football metaphor there in the title, right? This is the video version of Paul's columns on Substack called Beyond the Noise, cutting to the chase on important health topics. So let's start, Paul, by just reviewing the Wakefield business. What happened?
So in 1998, Andrew Wakefield, a British gastroenterologist actually, published a paper in The Lancet. It was involved 12 children, 8 of whom had autism. And according to this paper, those signs and symptoms of autism developed within a month of receiving this combination measles, mumps, rubella, or MMR vaccine. That was it. That was the whole paper. I mean, there was not a control group. He postulated that that vaccine had caused autism, although because there was no control group, he couldn't really postulate that at all. You might as well have had a paper that had 8 children who developed autism within a month of eating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I mean, he had a sort of theory of reasons for why MMR vaccine would cause autism. He argued that because these vaccines were given in combination as compared to separately, that overwhelmed the immune system. He could have, but he never tested to see whether or not in any way these children's immune system were blunted. He then said because the immune system was suppressed, that allowed measles vaccine virus to travel to the intestinal mucosal surface, reproduce at the intestinal mucosal surface, and damage the intestine. Now, he biopsied all of these children, so he could have certainly done PCR analysis looking for evidence of measles vaccine virus genome, but he didn't. Also, when he published those pictures of these intestines, he called it ileal lymphoid nodular hyperplasia. The notion was that the lymphatic system was much more pronounced and larger than you would expect. But when pediatric gastroenterologists looked at this, he was an adult gastroenterologist, they said normal intestine. Just like when you look at the back, say, of a 3-year-old's throat, the tonsils look larger than if you look at the back of a 40-year-old person's throat. So he didn't really even get that right. Then he argued that because this intestine was damaged, that allowed for as yet unidentified encephalopathic or brain-damaging proteins to travel to the brain, cross an intact blood-brain barrier, and cause autism. Now, he actually, at his son's birthday party, had collected sera from children who didn't have autism. So he had controls, but he never tested those controls against sera from these children who had autism to see whether there were any proteins that were different. He just postulated maybe it was casein, maybe it was gluten, kind of appealing to the Whole Foods crowd. So it was really like imagining 6 impossible things before breakfast, to quote the Red Queen from Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. And nonetheless, it was published. And I think the editor-in-chief at the time, Richard Horton, argued, well, I mean, here's a hypothesis. Let's run it up the flagpole, see if anybody salutes. And he tried to lessen the impact of that paper by having Bob Chen and Frank DiStefano from the CDC, who were vaccine safety officers at the CDC, to criticize that paper and say just what we've said here, which is there was no control group. So you can't really say anything about causality. But, here it was, a disorder that was emotionally difficult for parents and financially difficult for parents. And now you had a reason, MMR vaccine. And so it took off.
But as you say, many studies were done to address the connection.
Right. So you can do the kinds of studies retrospectively to see whether or not children who got MMR vaccine were at greater risk of having autism. Not easily done. I mean, you have to control for things like especially healthcare seeking behavior, socioeconomic background, medical background. So you can isolate the effect of that one variable, receipt of the MMR vaccine, to see whether it did increase the incidence of autism. And study after study was done in 7 different countries on 3 continents, involving thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of children, costing tens of billions of dollars to show that MMR vaccine didn't cause autism. So the nicest thing you could say about the Wakefield paper was it raised a hypothesis, but that was a testable hypothesis, and it has been tested. And so that question has been answered. MMR vaccine doesn't cause autism.
All right, so you use that as the backdrop for the Senate confirmation hearings of RFK Jr. You say he used three strategies typical of personal injury lawyers. So first, to deny existence of studies that don't support your position. So what did he do there?
Right. So he's a personal injury lawyer. He is paid to represent a position. The group that has paid him since 2018 is Children's Health Defense, which pays him hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to represent the position that vaccines are causing harm, whether it's neurodevelopmental problems like autism or autoimmune problems or rheumatologic problems. That's what he is paid to do. And what personal injury lawyers do is that they, one, try and disagree with any piece of information that counters their notion, in this case, that vaccines are causing harm. So what was striking actually at that committee hearing, when Senator Sanders from Vermont said, but there are dozens of studies out there showing that vaccines don't cause autism. He said, I haven't seen any high quality studies. If you could show me a high quality study that does that, I'll believe it and I'll shout it out to the American public, but I don't see any such studies. He just sort of denied their existence, which was enormously frustrating for people on the panel who asked him that.
Wouldn't rest on a single study.
Right.
And all studies can be methodology.
Okay. Don't mean to be rude. I don't have a lot of time.
Just saying
you would not be. I just heard you say you could not be happier if you were proved wrong. Mr. Chairman, I asked to put into the record 16 studies done by scientists and doctors all over the world saying that vaccines do not cause autism. Are you happy?
And the other thing that was a tell for him, if you will, he constantly talks about how we're a sicker society than ever before. We have more chronic diseases than ever before. He said, look at children, for example. 1 out of every 36 children has a chronic disease. Well, that's the incidence of autism spectrum disorder. That's what he's talking about. When he says children have more chronic disease than ever before, that's what he's talking about. And he believes vaccines are the cause.
Maybe you should look into cell phones.
Right.
Another crazy thing. Okay, so next, the second strategy, promote any study that supports your position, no matter how poorly done. How did he do that?
Right, so he put forward a study that he argued was a high-quality study. Look, here it is. Here's a study that shows that vaccines cause autism. So he ignores all those studies that were very well done, very well controlled, peer-reviewed, published in excellent scientific or medical journals, and offered this paper.
What studies have you utilized to come to the conclusion that vaccines cause autism?
I'm happy to sit down with you.
No, please, just answer me that.
Look at the Mawson study, Senator.
So the paper was not published in a scientific or medical journal. It was published in a med blog. So it was peer reviewed, if you will, by a guy named Peter McCullough, who's an anti-vaccine activist. It was supported by the National Vaccine Information Center, which is an anti-vaccine group, virulent anti-vaccine group. And if you looked at the data, it was utterly unconvincing because, first of all, they had a unvaccinated rate, children who were unvaccinated, as being very much higher than you would expect normally. Similarly, they had an autism rate that was much higher than you would expect normally. And their way of trying to determine the vaccinated versus unvaccinated group was through electronic health records. But they failed to determine whether or not these children could have gone outside of that particular Medicaid program and gotten their vaccine through the Vaccine for Children's program. They also didn't determine whether or not autism was diagnosed before or after getting the first vaccine. So it was horribly flawed. The two authors that were in that paper had already had papers retracted because those papers were horribly flawed. And this was the high quality study that he was arguing was proved his point. So it shows you he just acts like any personal injury lawyer acts and is immune to data, at least data that contradicts what he's being paid to say.
Do you think when he's testifying and he holds up this flawed paper that some of the senators think it's okay because they just don't get it?
They don't get it. And this is the way he works. He knows that when he says that a paper has been published, that no one has read that paper. So, for example, during this hearing, he was questioned by Senator Also Brooks from Maryland. She's an African-American woman who said she really didn't like it, that he basically said that African-American children were different from Caucasian children and should have a different schedule than Caucasian children because they're more sensitive to vaccines. This is what he said. So he brought up a paper. He said it was the Poland paper.
You said the following, and I quote, We should not be giving Black people the same vaccine schedule that's given to whites because their immune system is better than ours. Can you please explain what you meant?
There's a series of studies, I think most of them by Poland.
Now, it's funny, many people, including friends of mine, emailed me and say, was this a paper from Poland? What Polish paper is he talking about? It was actually a paper from Greg Poland from the Mayo Clinic that was published looking at children who got the MMR vaccine to find that those children who were African American actually had a somewhat greater immune response to the rubella component. In no sense did he recommend getting different schedules for vaccines for African American children. But the way he said it at that hearing was he said those children were more reactogenic, more reactive, suggesting that it was a safety issue, which wasn't true either. So he counts on that. I mean, there's another concern about vaccines and autism was that the thimerosal, this ethyl mercury containing preservative in vaccines, caused autism. That question was raised in the early 2000s, was quickly put to rest by a series of at least 5 studies that show you were no more likely to get autism if you'd gotten these ethyl mercury preservative containing vaccines as compared to ones that didn't contain vaccines. That was very quickly dismissed. And frankly, thimerosal is now out of vaccines given to young children, and the incidence of autism has only increased. So if you use their logic, then we should put thimerosal back in vaccines to lower the rate again. That's just a joke. But I think that what he does, and he did this on Joe Rogan's show, he says there's the Burbacker study, which showed that when you inoculate baby monkeys with thimerosal at the levels that would be equivalent to what children are getting in vaccines, and then you look at their brains, that there's massive inflammation. That's what he says. And he says that all the time, the Burbacker studies. Whenever he gives a talk, he often talks about the Burbacker study. Mm-hmm. Well, read the study. It doesn't say that at all. It doesn't say that there was any inflammation. The animals were clinically normal. When he inoculated them with methylmercury, which is in many ways has a much longer half-life and is more dangerous, then you saw a problem, but not with ethylmercury in vaccines. So he counts on that. He counts on people not knowing that. And it's part of, I think, what makes him so dangerous.
Yeah, you would think at this level, when something so important is at stake, head of HHS, that the Congress and the senators would read, but they don't.
No, it does ask a lot. I think it asks a lot of senators to do that. The key player here was Senator William Cassidy, a Republican from Louisiana, and he was kind enough actually to call me several times, 4 times actually, in the week heading up to those hearings. And he would send me these papers and he would say, well, is this true? Tell me why this isn't true. Papers that the anti-vaccine activists had given him. And so I spent a lot of time deconstructing those papers, sending him information back. And I was certain that he was going to vote no. He's a doctor. He's a gastroenterologist. He was actually a very big advocate for the hepatitis B vaccine when it first came out, was William Cassidy, because he took care of patients who had liver cancer caused by hepatitis B. So he was really a big advocate. I was sure he was going to vote no, but I think he ended up not being a profile in courage and ended up voting yes. Now, the final vote is this coming Wednesday, so this is February 12th, will be the final vote for his confirmation. And we'll see, maybe he'll change his mind, but I'm not holding out a lot of hope that RFK Jr. will be anything but confirmed coming 2 days from now.
All right, and then the third strategy is that anyone who disagrees with you is a shill for big pharma.
Right. This is sort of classic personal injury lawyer stuff, right? When the facts are on your side, argue the facts. When the law's on your side, argue the law. When neither are on your side, attack the witness. So that's what he did. I think probably the most dramatic moment was when Bernie Sanders was, questioning him about his consistent refusal to admit that there are studies out there that show that vaccines don't cause autism. So he kept pushing him on that. And so then RFK Jr. pushed back by saying, you're just a shill for Big Pharma. You get money from Big Pharma to represent their point of view.
The problem of corruption is not just in the federal agencies, it's in Congress too. Almost all the members of this panel are accepting, including yourself, are accepting millions of dollars from the pharmaceutical industry. Protecting their interests.
And that, first of all, that wasn't true. And Bernie Sanders pushed back on that. Probably it reached the level of parody when one of the senators read a letter from 77 Nobel Prize winners that decried RFK Jr.'s nomination to be Secretary of Health and Human Services and said that he was not fit for that he put America's public health in jeopardy, according to that letter. To which RFK Jr. responded, well, check out their conflicts of interest, because if you disagree with RFK Jr., then you must be deeply in the pocket of Big Pharma.
It's just highly unlikely that 77 Nobel laureates would all be in the pockets of pharma. It's just crazy. But you just have to say it, and then you get people thinking about the possibility.
Well, it appeals to the notion of conspiracy, right? That there's a deep state. There are evil forces working behind the curtain, and that sells these days.
So let's say he's confirmed. He's going to continue this nonsense about lying about vaccines, and if so, what's going to happen?
You can count on it. He believes that vaccines cause autism. So if you have someone who comes in to be head of Health and Human Services that believes vaccines are doing harm, why would you expect anything other that he will do everything he can to weaken the vaccine infrastructure, to make vaccines less affordable or less available? I am sure that's going to happen. And it is upsetting to me that these senators, lacking any sort of courage, were willing to stand up for the children of this country, especially children with autism. I mean, children with autism in many ways are hurt more than the other children for two reasons. One, because a study recently in the Journal of the American Medical Association showed that children with autism are less likely to be vaccinated than those who don't have the disorder. And in addition, their healthy siblings are less likely to be vaccinated. Also, there are a lot of promising leads for the cause or causes of autism. And this vaccines cause autism fruitless dead-end hypothesis has just sort of kind of diverted, I think, energy and resources away from much more promising leads.
Is there a way that he could, for example, say, we're not using MMR vaccine anymore?
Well, he could say, I don't think this vaccine has been tested enough. I don't think we have enough data on this. I think we need to take a step back and do the kinds of studies that show that this vaccine is safe or shows that this vaccine is effective. He could do that.
Really? So, and no scientist at HHS could say, but sir, here are all the data that you want.
Well, in theory, the head of the FDA, who looks like it's going to be Marty McCarry, or the head of the CDC, and I'm not sure who that's going to be. It looked like it was going to be Dave Weld. Now it's not clear that that's going to be true at all. They could push back and say, no, we're not going to do that. But that doesn't seem to be the way things are going. People seem to bow down to the powers that be, and nobody seems to push back.
This is really awful. And I think people need to realize this, that this is not just, yeah, okay, fine. This is serious business if people have limited access to all kinds of vaccines, which he seems to want to do.
It's already happening. I mean, you see there's outbreaks now of measles in Texas, these, I think, 10 to 14 cases, and we're just getting started this year. I really think that's going to be the canary in the coal mine. Measles is the most contagious of the vaccine preventable diseases. We went from 58 cases in 2023 to about 280 cases in 2024. And if those numbers continue to increase, you're going to again start to see children dying of measles in the United States. I
don't know if this is possible. You know, some of the other things that the administration has done are now being challenged by courts, right? So is it possible that some court somewhere could say, no, you cannot restrict people's access to this vaccine?
Yes, I think that's right. I think that's what you'll see. You'll see a series of lawsuits, and then we'll see to what extent the court system holds up, or if it goes to the Supreme Court, whether that holds up.
Yeah, I mean, the Supreme Court, who knows where they're going to go on. It would be crazy, right? But they should know better. But crazy times.
Yes.
Right. We will put a link to this column in the show notes. That's Beyond the Noise with Dr. Paul Offit. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Vincent.